It can happen in workplaces, it can happen through friendship groups, it can happen where people actually seek it out, people slide into their DMs. Initially, it just starts off as a nice interaction. So at that point, we're not crossing any boundary.
There's still a point where you have to consciously make the switch.
Yes. It can happen to anybody, and people that think that it won't happen to me or I would never do that, they're often really surprised when they find themselves in that situation. We can absolutely move past cheating. It doesn't have to mean the end of a relationship. Often when people do discover their partner has cheated, and this sounds crazy, but it can be a relief for them.
Yeah. So what's the key to, if people choose to get past it?
So it's got to be in that very beginning point that every time I'm approaching you, you're
the person who has been cheated on. Mm-hmm. You're going to, I imagine, have judgment from all friends and family.
Yes.
And you're going to feel pressure to break up with that person.
Yes.
Even though maybe you don't want to.
Yes.
What do you do in that situation?
You've got to listen to yourself.
So is there a time when you just really shouldn't try and save the relationship?
Yes. The times when it probably would be very hard to salvage is when...
Hello everyone, welcome to our house where we usually film the podcast. This is the reverse angle. You don't usually get to see our kitchen. Just wanted to quickly let you know before we start the show that we have a 30-day challenge that we wanted to tell you about.
This time of the year is really difficult for me personally to try and keep up with all my good habits and good intentions. I think it's just the cold weather doesn't let me get out of bed as easy as in the summer, and my beach walks kind of go by the wayside, so therefore my breath works at the end of the beach walk also go out the window. So I thought I would create a challenge so that we can all post or do something every single day that's looking after ourselves. It doesn't have to be anything huge, but just that intentional act to show yourself that you're important. And I thought that if I got everyone else involved, that would keep me accountable and keep you accountable, so we can all do it together.
So it's really easy, it's totally free. Basically, all it is a private WhatsApp group. So you'll be part of the WhatsApp group, we'll be part of the WhatsApp group, and we'll share things every day, just one little thing that we're doing, whether it's grounding, an ice bath, a walk on the beach, or a breath work, or a meditation. And it's all about just sort of supporting each other through the month of July. So it's 30 days from the 1st to the 30th of July. And you can find out some information on the website, tracyquayle.com. Just plug your name and email address in. Then I'll get in touch with you, grab your mobile number and pop you on the WhatsApp group. And we will start on July 1.
We look forward to seeing you inside the challenge.
All right, bye guys. Enjoy the episode. Welcome everybody to the Reconnect Self podcast, the show that helps you ultimately rediscover what brings you joy. My name is Scott. I am a filmmaker and your host for today. And I'm here with my wife Tracy, who is a counsellor of over 20 years experience, which we have now fully
established.
How are you, babe?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
I've got my baby on my lap.
Yes, Lenny has joined you for an episode, which is good. Should we do a quick sponsorship? This show is brought to you by us. Yet again, the Reconnect to Self retreat, which our next one is in August, which is coming up soon. Mm-hmm. And then you have a relationship retreat in
September.
So give us one quick spiel about the individual retreat. What do you love to help people with?
I love people coming back to themselves, loving on themselves, realising how important they are and how necessary it is for us to actually look after ourselves to have a healthy life. Like, we can give to others, but if we're not giving to ourselves, we're going to be depleted, burn out, and we can't sustain that. So we need to be looking after ourselves first, and this retreat helps you to do that.
Very good. And the relationship one, just quickly?
This is a way to reset and reconnect in your relationship. So looking at all the things that are underlying the relationship that can help it be a healthy, functional, happy relationship. So things like conflict resolution skills, communication skills, looking at intimacy and sex. We're covering everything in that retreat.
Yeah. Man, you've been doing that for years and years.
About 5. We're coming up to maybe 6 years now.
Amazing. I remember when you did your first one.
I know, crazy. Like now we're close to 20 now.
That's kudos to you and Tina, who runs that with you. I'm not involved in the relationship one, but if you want to hang out with me, I am involved in the individual one. Well, today's episode is kind of a little bit related to the relationship retreat because the topic is cheating.
But we don't let anyone come on the relationship retreat that is in the middle of crisis with cheating, because that wouldn't be that helpful for them. So we're going to do a whole episode on cheating and how it impacts relationships, how we can get through it or not get through it, just everything related to cheating.
Okay. Well, why don't we start with what do you actually define as cheating?
I would say it's a crossing of a boundary. So that might be that in the relationship, you're very clear, or your partner is very clear with the things that are okay and not okay, when it comes to relationships with the opposite gender or the same-sex gender if someone's gay, but just basically how they expect that person to behave. And so some people that can be that, they don't like them having friends of the opposite sex, that could be a boundary crossing for them. So I would never judge what that boundary is that someone's put in their relationship. My only criteria is that both of them agree to that and both of them are okay with that.
Okay. So because there can be, when you say cheating, most people just jump to physical cheating, whether that's usually having sex, but, making out in the, the office cupboard, stationary cupboard or whatever. But it's usually people would assume it's physical.
It's physical, yes.
But it can be emotional.
Absolutely, yes. It can be emotional. It can be that you're bringing them into your life in a way that they're knowing really personal things about you and your partner isn't. So that would definitely be a boundary crossing, for your partner. They wouldn't be okay.
Give me an example of that. That sounds interesting.
So if someone is, say, opening up to a male colleague at work and telling them all their personal business and things that are really, going on in their inner world, that could be fine if their partner is also in on that and also knows about the relationship and knows how close those people are. That wouldn't be a boundary cross if that's very transparent. It would only be if that's kind of done underground. They're messaging, without people knowing it. Their partner doesn't know the information that partner is sharing. So they would just feel very excluded from, that information. And so that could be a boundary crossing for some people.
Okay. You know how you like, or you actually don't like, you hate when I use words that I'm not 100% sure what the meaning is. I'm going to do it again. I think the word is surreptitiously.
Oh my God.
How's that for a word?
I don't even know what it is.
Surreptitious, I believe, means, you're doing it sort of on the DL, on the down low.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Without the
why
other
we needed
person.
to add that in, but we did.
Because it's fun. I like expanding my vocabulary.
We'll just indulge you. Yes.
All right. Well, so we've sort of established there's different types of cheating.
And it would depend on the relationship. So like I said, it would depend on what those boundaries are in the relationship, but there would be common ones that people obviously know that it's not okay in your relationship to be holding hands and kissing and having sex with somebody else. That would be pretty obvious ones.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have lots of different couples, and so sometimes that's actually okay in relationships, but that's a whole other topic. But again, it's more about it's agreed upon or it's not agreed upon around those boundaries.
Yeah, that could be a whole nother show, that other topic, but we won't go there today. My next question would be, I do want to point out that kind of the main point of today is you want to help people get past cheating.
Yeah, we can absolutely move past cheating. Even in my personal life, when I have, friends that have gone through this and straight away everyone's, going on the bandwagon of breaking up and this is, all terrible. And yes, I absolutely understand it's heartbreaking and it's very devastating, but it doesn't have to mean the end of a relationship.
Yeah, that's the part that I find interesting. Like, I have thought in the past, what would I do? And my default is I would dump you. Just...
Everyone sort of thinks that about themselves. I think that we have these really strong moral boundaries and we grow up thinking that, nope, this is right, this is wrong, and it's very black and white and very clear. But I know from my couples, that's not the way. That's not the case. Lots of people
it's complex.
Can find that really, really difficult and they don't want to end their whole relationship and therefore their way of life because of that.
And I'd imagine... And obviously not making excuses or oversimplifying it, but there could be situations where the relationship has got to a point that, and I don't want to say like forced the other person to cheat, but has got to a point where they're not communicating, they're not intimate.
They're ripe for the picking. They're almost like
Yeah.
they're the perfect, conditions for them to be open to other attention.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of how it plays out. Like sometimes it can be, wherever that person might have met somebody, it could be, gosh, I've had people where it's their kids' friends, their kids' parents. Kids' friends' parents that they've had an affair with. So it could be a sporting...
that would be brutal.
That is brutal, yes, because that also affects their social networks and there's lots of shame and embarrassment about going to school. So that can be really, really awful and really challenging. But yeah, it can happen in workplaces. It can happen through friendship groups. It can happen where people actually seek it out and, it's online. Or have people slide into their DMs and it be online. So there can be lots of places where it happens. But what I commonly see is it might be that initially it just starts off as a nice interaction. That person chats to that person, that felt nice, they had a bit of banter or just had a good conversation and they want to do that again. So at that point, we're not crossing any boundaries. That's absolutely fine. We can chat to people. But it's when it starts being that now they're seeking that person out and now, they're doing the messages kind of on the down low or they're looking for opportunities to connect with that person or to reach out with messaging, even when it's not really that crucial. So you're trying to create that connection. The way that I see that is if I had a glass of water in front of me with room temperature water and I put my hand in it, it would be like adding boiling hot water from the kettle and just slowly adding that. So every interaction is like that. We're just getting that water slightly warmer, but it's still manageable.
So your boundaries are changing.
Boundaries are changing. You're just slowly creeping those boundaries. So it might be that, it's not a big deal that I'm talking to somebody of the opposite gender or, same sex if it was a gay relationship. But it's more about, is this now creeping to the next level where I'm wanting to tell them more things, or now it's getting a little bit flirty and now I'm actually being a little bit suggestive in my messages. So you're watching for that creep. And as soon as you're crossing it from that friendship, because friendship's obviously okay, to it being flirty, now we're pushing those boundaries.
And you would say that is a conscious decision? Like, I know it can creep up on you, but surely at some point...
I think the flirting, yes, it's conscious, but it can easily slip it in there. Banter can be quite lighthearted and things, and innuendo can also be a bit lighthearted, but it'll definitely form a point where someone is actively crossing that line. They'll always get that bit where, oh shit, what did I just do? Like they're going to know what they're doing. They're pushing it to that next level. Okay, I'll give you an example. Lots of people can look at porn and, through my clients, I've heard that, when they're looking at different things, they might be a pop-up, a message that comes up. And when people click on those messages, it can be things like, you can talk to these particular women using these coupons that they've offered you. And so at that point, if they're, clicking on those messages, they might not be thinking that they're really crossing a boundary. They're kind of just following their curiosity. They're knowing it's not great, but they're not necessarily thinking I'm going to go and cheat on my partner. They're just following that curiosity. But I've heard, many times that once they've clicked and they're starting a conversation with somebody, then that's when we're actively into the boundary crossing. And
because that's what I was talking about before. There's still a point where you have to consciously make the switch.
Yes. And in these occasions, sometimes people have gone to the shops and gotten prepaid Visa cards or, found ways of paying for this that wasn't going to be traced. So in that way, it's a very, in that way, it's very deliberate at that point. It's definitely a crossing of a boundary. They're knowing what they're doing. Prior to that, they might have been just a little bit curious and a little bit, intrigued. But at that point, when they've taken that step, they're definitely crossing a boundary and knowing what they're doing.
Because we often joke that it's almost impossible for us to cheat without the other person knowing because our accounts are so interwoven. We share
Apple accounts to the point where it's annoying. I get your
my
messages.
Text messages, which I don't even know how to turn that off. And I'm reasonably tech savvy, so you're seeing who I'm communicating with. Obviously, we have location things for the kids, which has our phones on it.
Yes.
And didn't you ask me in the bathroom the other night, or you said this joke? You go, you'd never be able to cheat on me. I think it was when we were talking about doing this episode.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, would I just get a burner phone?
Do we've often joked in our relationship that Scott's too lazy to cheat. Because
that's totally true.
because he can barely keep up with me.
No,
He's
it's
not
too
going to be
much
trying to meet somebody else's needs.
Well, I can give you some perspective, right? Like, it's not like I've had women flock to me, but there's been times, like in the office, for example, where there might be a person in the office who you have good banter with.
Yeah.
This is when I actually had an office job, so this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And there's one in particular that I remember, and I would chat to her quite a lot, but I would always think, for me, I got too much to lose. Like, I think about it in the sense of, it's a physical kind of release that you want to have, it's exciting or whatever. Not that, we were literally chatting and it wasn't even really flirting, but I knew I could probably take it to flirting if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I didn't even take it to that point.
Yeah.
I just enjoyed chatting with this person. I'm saying this person like it was a female. It wasn't a guy. But I no. If it was, it would have been Ben from The Office. I really liked him. But yeah, there was always something inside me that was like, don't even take it to that level, because why would you? You're just opening up this world of a lot of work, a lot of hiding, a lot of anxiety to what? Get a physical release.
But you're thinking about the consequences, and I think that's the difference.
I think that's actually, haven't we said this about me before? I have this ability that I think other people don't have, where I can picture things. This is maybe why I'm good at making films. I can picture things that are going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
When we go on holidays or we are
Looking at an outing.
Looking at an outing, and it sounds good in theory, and then I go, yeah, okay, but we have 3 little kids, and so this isn't going to happen. I'm very rational, and I guess that is a me thing, and I can still understand how other people would be swept up in the emotion of it all.
And if they're coming from a relationship where, I'll just say it's flat energy, and often in my relationship counselling, I'm trying to get people to put in fresh energy. And that's because, after a certain period of time, we're doing the same things, we're having the same conversations, we're in the same routines. Like, it's so boring that when someone else comes along and they've got that little bit of spark of energy and they're giving you feelings that you haven't had for a very long time, that can be very addictive.
Yeah.
You're wanting that more and more. If I was showing people in the office, physically of what I would be doing is, if I'm turned in towards my partner and we're having good conversation and we're having good interactions and, and doing activities and things, my body language is really turned into my partner, and kind of the rest of the world gets my back. When someone has a new hobby, a new interest, something that's getting their attention, they're turning towards that, and their partner is now getting their back. And when someone's starting a new friendship, because usually that's how it would start. Like, I don't really have very many clients where they've gone, oh, I'm going to go out and cheat tonight. Like, that's not usually how that plays out. Although I have had a couple of like that, but that's not the most common way of people cheating. It would normally be someone's gotten their attention in some way, gives them a nice feeling, and they'll keep going with that. Yep. And then it might have even started off as being appropriate. They had things to do with each other. Maybe they're in a sporting club and they had to do lots of interactions together. And then suddenly that becomes a bit more about your personal life and what's going on with the kids or what's going on in your personal world. And so then again, it's still being very appropriate, but that relationship is really getting closer and more connected. And then we're starting to creep into those nice feelings of, oh, wow, someone's there for me and someone's listening to me and making me feel important. And usually when someone does have an affair, that person is the most supportive person to them, because they're not fighting over the dishes or who's doing the washing or the cooking or the whatever. So it's a very sacred relationship in the sense of you're not having real life impact it.
Yeah. That brings me to something that is not on the run sheet, but I remembered. We've talked about this in the past. I've got to articulate this properly. So there's a mundaneness to everyday life.
Yeah.
So if you're married and you've been married for a long time, there's a certain, there can be a Groundhog Day
Absolutely.
vibe.
Yes.
And then people maybe start having an affair or whatever, that affair is not grounded in real life. That's the point
Absolutely,
that I'm trying
it's
to
not.
make.
Yeah. They haven't met your friends. They've not lived in your world where they're seeing your schedule. You're carving out time for that person in a very, sneaky way.
Which can be exciting and maybe, a little bit like a movie because it's not real life.
Yes. And so that can add to the whole chemicals
Yeah.
and adrenaline and all the rest of it, which can feel really lovely and exciting, like you said, and break them out of their Groundhog Day. But again, once you put that, so when people have had affairs and then they've decided to end their relationships and be together, they'll often really struggle because...
Yeah, now all of a sudden you're doing the dishes and you're taking
And
the
it's
kids
not so
to footy.
exciting. Yeah, it's not so exciting. And all those things that you didn't see about that person because you only saw them for, those tiny little bits of time that you could manage.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, there's all these other parts of you that I didn't really know.
Yeah, I bet that's huge.
It is huge, yes.
So I'd imagine the number of people who would break up. So they break up their marriage, go with a new person.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the separation rate of that new person would be reasonably high.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure we don't have stats, but
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a common thing. So can happy couples still have to deal with this?
Yeah, because again, it can happen to anybody. And people that think that it won't happen to me or I would never do that, they're often really surprised when they find themselves in that situation because, you don't know what that can look like, if you're not being aware of those boundary crossings. Like I've had people before where they've told me it'll be a situation. Like if I give you an example, if someone goes to a convention and I'll give you an exact example, but it won't be obviously identifiable. He went to a conference, this client, and went to friend's room. They were a couple and they had a single friend and they were just chatting, the four of them. Very appropriate, nothing wrong with that. But when that couple decided to go to bed and kind of essentially kick the other two out of the room, they decided to go across the road to a pub and continue, having a drink. So that's probably where he should have called the night. Like I don't think the wife would have been happy him going out on his own with a random female he just met.
Yep.
And so that's immediately where he's crossed that boundary. That wouldn't have been appropriate. Being in the room with the friends that they're comfortable with, no problem.
Yep.
But it's as soon as he crossed it to the next level. And then, yes, he ended up sleeping with that person.
So that's kind of like that random one-off thing. Alcohol or drugs might have been
And he
involved,
didn't intend that. Like that was not him going out that night thinking this is what's going to happen, but he let himself be in situations where it was easy to cross that one boundary to the next. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about some ways which might be interesting / funny to talk about ways that people get caught. I don't know if we're giving people like some inside information of how to avoid being caught by sharing this. So, but I still think it's worth having a chat. Because I also think, and I know that you've actually told me this, it's important for the person getting cheated on that they don't feel like they're going insane.
Yes.
And then maybe we can then move into ways to get past cheating, because as we talked about at the start of the episode, like...
I work with people that cheat and have gone through that in their relationships.
And not everyone wants to just give up a 20-year marriage or however long it is for, an indiscretion.
Yes.
I've said I would, but we haven't got there.
We haven't had to cross that
No,
bridge.
we haven't.
No. Okay, so some ways people have been caught is, and this one's probably the most alarming for people, is where, like what we were talking about with all of our text messages all being merged. I've had many a client where they've found all those messages on iPads or anything that's linked. In fact, I've had people where they're watching those messages play out in real time.
Oh my God.
They had their partner in a different room messaging another person and they're just watching them come up on the iPad one by one.
Oh my, that is horrible.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so if you are going to cheat, get your tech sorted. Get your tech.
Don't.
Get an IT manager. Get something.
It's one of those things that they don't think about. Yeah. So that's been a big one. That's happened many, many times. Sometimes people can actually be dobbed in. So a person they would have been communicating with, like I have lots of FIFO clients, and so this can be not saying common, but I guess more common where it's an online kind of a cheating, and that person might reach out to, the partner and say, hey, look, I've been communicating with your blah, 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 and might share screenshots of
Why
messages.
is that related to FIFO?
Just because I think when they're away, people can get lonely and they can, start reaching out to other people to get, kind of needs met. And and I'm not saying that obviously every FIFO person is susceptible to that. I'm just saying that that's commonly where I personally, as a therapist, have seen a fair bit.
I know from experience. So I was marketing manager for Dale Alcock Homes for quite a while, a number of years, 6 years. And Dale one time said something in an interview, and he said something about FIFO couples and how, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was basically insinuating that cheating is very rife.
Yeah, it is.
That became a front page news story.
Really?
And he got hammered on, back then it was really just Facebook.
Yeah.
And guess whose job it was to sort that shit out?
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
The PR mess that followed.
Yeah.
So FIFO couples, we're not saying anything. It's just Tracy has seen a few of these examples. Don't come after us on social media. It's just, I guess, one of those situations where,
But if the relationship's not really connected, they're not maintaining that connection in the time that person's away, again, either partner could be ripe for the environment of someone coming along and giving attention and making them feel, important and give them those nice feelings and things. So it doesn't matter what the environment is. That's kind of what can be the risk factor.
Yeah.
In there. So, so online, people can be dobbed in.
I bet you there's a location-based one.
Yes, definitely, that location-based one. In fact, there was one, this couple that I saw, they'd already identified there was cheating. The wife had cheated, but they were going to work through it, and that's why they were seeing me. And then they came to me another time, and the way that she'd been found out the second time, once, she'd said she was going to end the affair and going to work on it and things, but she didn't. She'd gone to some sort of event in the city, and she was meant to be coming home, by the train, and he had messaged her and saying, are you going to come home soon? So she said, yep, I'm on the train, I'll be home, whatever. And so he checked the location and saw that she was at the train station she was supposed to drive home from. And I think he was going to put her dinner in the oven. Like, it was quite a sweet reason why he was kind of waiting for her, and monitoring her.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when she wasn't home in maybe 20 minutes, he checked where she was again, and she was still at that train station.
Yeah.
And then
That's
it went
a
on.
red flag.
Yes, it was for them in their relationship because of this cheating.
He's not thinking it's car trouble.
He's not thinking it's car trouble. No. So I think she maybe took and maybe 45 minutes to an hour at that train station before coming home. And so as soon as she came in the door, he was like, right, what was going on? Yeah. And she confessed immediately because they already had that in their relationship. So that was another one where, the location services dobbed that in.
Yeah.
It can be, where else can people get caught? I guess seeing somebody like be inappropriate, like you can kind of see that connection between people.
Yep.
People often feel like they're being so discreet, like in a workplace.
I saw this in my workplace.
Yes.
And it was the most obvious, non-discreet thing I've ever seen in my life. I won't say which workplace or anything, but this thing went on for months, and they were both in serious relationships. And they would go for a walk, like just, you two going for a walk together. You haven't really been friends for the last 2 years, and now all of a sudden you're going on walks at lunchtime. And
and you're just popping past his desk, and you're just having a little chat in the lunchroom.
Always sitting next to each other at work events, and just
in your own little bubble.
Yeah, and in many ways it was actually quite sweet. Like they were
not for their partners.
Not for their partners.
No. But workplaces, because we are, and I always talk about this, we are so in our habits, and we're doing 90 to 95% the same behaviours day in, day out, but including thoughts and conversations. So all of a sudden, if you see a colleague that's normally got a certain routine because we're such creatures of habit, and all of a sudden they're deviating past someone's desk, it's noticeable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also for partners, that's the same thing. All of a sudden, if their partner is, showing a bit more interest in something that they wouldn't normally have, and don't get me wrong, people can often think that by someone having a new gym routine or interest in their appearance that something's going on, they just might be looking after themselves. But yes, it also can be they're doing things slightly different because there's something else going on also.
Yeah.
So when you were saying before about people can feel like they're going crazy, that's one of the biggest things for my clients, that when we are seeing these different behaviors, we can get a gut feeling about certain things. And, usually our guts are pretty good. That's how we should be making our decisions and sort of tuning into ourselves to get information. So when someone's picking up on these changes or these differences and they're just getting that feeling that something's not right, when they approach their partner and they, try and inquire about this, usually the partner will very much dismiss that, and even worse, might attack the other person. Things like, oh, you're crazy, you're paranoid, you're always on my case, you're always in my business, why would you think I'd do anything like that?
The best form of defense is attack.
Yes. So they get very defensive, they get very attacking. And so that leaves very much confusion, because if what you're picking up on and what you're being told from the outside don't match, I won't want to swear, but it's a head F. So it really messes with your head when those two don't align. So often when people do discover their partner has cheated, like they've got that proof or that evidence, or someone's told them, whatever way that's been discovered, and this sounds crazy, but it can be a relief for them, because they feel like, I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was really paranoid. So to have that, come out that it was actually true can feel like, oh, thank goodness I wasn't just going crazy. Yeah. So, it's short-lived. They've got a lot of work to do, after that. So depending on how it's found out would depend on, kind of what happens next. But whenever someone's come to see me, when cheating's been an issue or a boundary cross, whatever we want to call it, the first thing we want to know is, does that person have the full story?
Yeah.
Because when someone's cheated, they want to know all that information. They want to know when it happened, how many times it happened. They want all the details. And when they don't get that, it's like they have pieces of a puzzle, but not the whole jigsaw being completed. And so it can drive them crazy. So if they don't have all that information, that puzzle's not complete, and they want to keep fishing and digging until they can find those pieces. And make it make sense. So the first thing I'll say to people is, do you feel like you have enough of the story that you're okay with that? And the reason I word it like that is, for some people, they might not want to know. It's not usually that common, but for some people, they might go, do you know what? I don't want that in my head. I've got enough information to leave it there, and they can be fine with that. For somebody else, they want the nitty gritty. They want when did it start? How did it start? What did you say? They want all of it. And if they don't get that, they will almost be like a dog with a bone. They will be asking that, in so many different ways.
I've seen that in TV shows where the person being cheated on wants like real specifics of the physical side of things.
And
what did you do? And
yes. And look, there's lots of different experts that have different opinions about this, in terms of that person doesn't need to know that for their head to have all that information and those images. I would still come down to, it's a personal choice. Because for somebody, they might need that, because otherwise they're going to ruminate. And in fact, they could even make that worse in their head of what they think has happened. It's what's happened compared to the reality. So it is a very personal thing, and I'll try and work with a couple to figure out where that is for that person and what their level is. But we want to get it to the point where they feel complete. They don't agree with it, but they go, I get it, and I hear how that started, and there's no missing pieces for me.
When you say they get it, they acknowledge it.
They acknowledge it, and because that's what I'm saying. They don't agree with it. They're not saying, "Oh, I'm good with that you did that," but they see how it played out, what the beginning point was, whatever. And again, if they don't have that, people can then start reflecting on their relationship and going, "I wonder if it was around then when you were telling me we were so good and you were loving me. Maybe you were full of shit." So they're going back and they're looking back at their relationship and almost lining up.
Yeah, connecting dots.
Oh, that time that you seemed like you were distant from me. I bet you were messaging her or him or whatever. But they're going back and doing that. So they do need the pieces, of the puzzle. When that's being done, this can also do a lot of damage in the relationship. And what I mean by that is, if the partner's coming up to the person saying, I want to know this, this, and this, if that person's response isn't anything but calm, loving, and accepting, it's going to impact the relationship. Commonly what I can see is that person getting defensive, and I've told you already, and how many times do we have to go through this, and what, you want me to blow by blow on everything we did, and they can just get really their back up. And so then that shuts that person down, and that creates a moment where, that's really uncomfortable now, so they don't feel like they can ask those questions. So that doesn't get resolved. And it certainly doesn't bring about healing. Yeah. Another thing that can happen, and this one's a funny one because it could almost be seen as being helpful that they're showing so much remorse, but when a person shows so much remorse that they are almost inconsolable, but their language is things like, I'm the worst person in the world, you deserve better than me, and I can't believe you're still with me, and da-da-da-da-da, and it becomes this, they're the victim. Their partner then has to stop and postpone kind of their emotions to soothe that person. To say, no, you're not, and you're a really good dad, and this was just a mistake, and we can get through it, and they're soothing that person. So there's a line between...
And that would be a head fuck as well.
Absolutely, because they're feeling like
I've decided
I can't...
we're swearing on this episode because it's kind of adult only anyway, so...
Okay.
Yeah, you can swear.
All right. Well, that's what it is, because they're not feeling like I can actually let loose on you with all these emotions and things I want to say, and not saying we want to get aggressive and abusive or anything, but when emotion's coming out, that's going to be heated, you know. And so if they're feeling like I can't even be true to my feelings because I'm going to overwhelm you or send you down that path further into depression or, you know, whatever, they're not being authentic to their experience. They're still protecting their partner. So that's not helpful either. Yeah. So we want remorse. We want, you know, putting our hand up and taking responsibility, but we don't want it to be where the other person has to postpone their feelings to now care for you.
Yeah. So what's the key to, if people choose to get past it?
So it's got to be in that very beginning point that every time I'm approaching you, that you're accepting, loving, you're saying things like, I get it, I fucked up.
Yeah.
I know I've done the damage here and I'm going to be here to repair it. Like you're saying really reassuring things like that. You're not, oh, how many times we're going to go through this, and getting that real hump, you know, about the situation. No, you caused it. You stick around and you do the work.
Yeah.
When we are seeing these different behaviours, we can get a gut feeling about certain things. And, you know, usually our guts are pretty good. That's how we should be making our decisions and sort of tuning into ourselves to get information. So when someone's picking up on these changes or these differences and they're just getting that feeling that something's not right, when they approach their partner and they, you know, try and inquire about this, usually the partner will very much dismiss that, and even worse, might attack the other person. You know, things like, oh, you're crazy, you're paranoid, you're always on my case, you're always in my business, why would you think I'd do anything like that?
The best form of defence is attack.
Yes. So they get very defensive, they get very attacking, and so that leaves very much confusion, because if what you're picking up on and what you're being told from the outside don't match, I won't want to swear, but it's a head F. So give your information, because what have you got to hide?
And that is something we didn't cover at the beginning when we were talking about, you know, signs that someone might be cheating, is people being really secretive about their phone.
Protective of their phone. So things like...
taking it out of the room with them, kind of thing.
So again, that's a change of behaviour. So where they would have just left their phone wherever and I could hand you my phone to look at, you know, the internet for whatever, all of a sudden I'm like, well, where's your phone?
Yeah.
Or people put their phone face down, because obviously we get preview messages come up.
Yeah.
So lots of times that can happen. Actually, that's another one that people have gotten caught lots of times, where their partner's been asleep and a preview message has come up on their phone that their partner's noticed.
Oh, okay.
And then they've grabbed the phone and gone through it.
Yeah.
But it's through that preview message that kind of gave them away. Yeah. So...
handle your notifications. Sorry.
Don't give the tips.
If anyone is listening to this...
We're just joking.
Yeah, I know I'm making it lighthearted. It's only because, you know, it's a very heavy topic, and if you are dealing with cheating in your relationship, I'm very empathetic. I'm not treating it lightheartedly. I'm just trying to bring a little bit of something else to this episode. Otherwise, it would just be an absolute heavy.
But I mean, there's hope here anyway, because I work with loads of couples and they come through successfully through their relationship if there's been cheating. So... going back to the repair, so we would be talking about transparency, everything being open and transparent, and that person, that's also including conversation. So where are you going? What are you doing? What time are you going to be home? Those kind of things. And what that person is saying and doing needs to match. So if you're telling me you're going to be home at 6, you're home at 6. If you're not home at 6, you've called me and told me why you're not home at 6. But, I mean, that's trust anyway. Yes. That's how we would build up trust in any relationship, but we're just going back to that with cheating. We're making sure that we're trying to put really nice love languages in here to get the connection happening again. It probably wouldn't be sex for a while. That person might not feel...
ask about that. Like, I've never thought about this until this conversation, but so you're trying to, reconnect and stay together.
Mm-hmm.
What happens around sex?
Well, it can be so different for different people. Like some people can have sex straight away, but it might come from a place of, not saying jealousy that they're jealous that their partner cheated, but almost insecurity that their partner cheated.
Yeah.
And so if you're having sex with me now, it kind of, I must be okay.
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
It can be a level of that, because that's what cheating can do. It can really erode someone's confidence, and it can make them feel like, well, what's wrong with me? And I'm less than, and you've chosen someone that's better looking, better body, better whatever.
Yeah.
Or I have had a client where that's actually not been the case, and she's actually been repulsed by the choices of partners that her partner had cheated on her with, which was more of a head fuck for her, because she's like, I don't even know what your appeal is.
Yeah.
Like, what are you getting from them that you're not getting from me if it's not a physical thing? So that can be very confusing too.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. So, we're going...
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm guessing, though, that's the more common situation is they don't have sex for a while. Would that be correct?
Yes. Because the person will feel really uncomfortable, or they can be triggered to think, gosh, what were you doing with that person, in this environment, kind of thing. Yeah. So that might take a while, and that could be, we're really building up that trust in the non-sexual touch and making that person feel really safe and really connected. Going back to how the person that's cheated should handle interactions when this is being brought up, because this will be brought up quite a lot. I see it as being, those American movies where someone goes to the door, the policeman goes to the door and he's about to give bad news to the wife that the husband's died or something. And the wife goes crazy. She kind of goes, "Wah!" She starts wailing and beating on his chest and kind of like that. But if he just remains stable and he just hugs her, she crumbles. She doesn't stay in that level. I see it the same way. That if you can just take that emotion that's being thrust at you and just be stable and consistent and just be, I get it. And you're not being defensive and reactive. You're just holding that space for your partner. They will go from being escalated to being very vulnerable and emotional. They will crumble. And if you can just hold them in that space, and again, just keep acknowledging, I fucked up. I get it. I've done this. I know. And I'm really, really, really sorry. Like, that is going to go a long way towards repair. And we want to do that every time. Not 1 out of 5 times. Like, we want that every time. That is where healing is going to happen faster. As we're moving forward in the relationship, if I have my hands kind of lined up and to show both partners, if one person, which is usually the person that's cheated, wants to move forward faster than the other person's kind of ready for the relationship too, now we have a disconnect. So if anyone's watching on video, my hands are now disconnected, showing that disconnect of one person moving forward and the other person moving at a slower pace. It has to be done at the slowest person's pace. And that's the person that's really hurt. So initially we're checking phones and computers if we want to. That's not a requirement. That's just, even having the ability to do that would foster trust. Because I'm now knowing that, hey, I can check you at any time. I don't need to. I don't want to do that, but I can if I want to. So that shows me you mustn't have anything to hide if you're willing to agree to that. Then after that, it kind of moves a bit more into the responsibility of the person that's not cheated, the person that's been cheated on. And what I mean by that is they now, whenever they have those temptations to want to check the phone or want to say, where were you? Or want to ask again for the 100th time about that story, now they've got to stop, sit with that uncomfortable emotion and kind of go, look, the last 3 times I checked that, there was nothing there. Or the last 20 times I checked that, there was nothing there. There isn't any evidence that anything's going on. My gut's pretty calm at the moment. So they have to settle themselves. So previously they were getting their partner to settle them and kind of reassure them nothing's going on and kind of soothe that yucky feeling they were getting. Now it's moving more into their responsibility that they need to do that for themselves. But we still want to be working on the relationship, all the way through, all the things that I would be suggesting to any couple to create connection, your date nights, your love languages, your deeper conversations. But what we might also move into now here is making sure that those conversations are more contained. So sometimes in that first beginning period, it can feel like one of these conversations could be sparked off at any point. And it probably can, because that partner is going to just be triggered to think about it at any moment of the day. But after that, we're going to move into where that sort of quietens down a little bit. And now they're still going to have those triggers, and especially if they're away from them, they might have those triggers. So we want to set it up that they're talking about that still, but more in a contained way. So they could say something like, how about we have Wednesdays after work, that's when we can talk about the situation. So that partner can save up all their questions or all their, angst, and that's where they're going to have that conversation. So that way both of them can feel like they can get through their week without that hanging over them, but they know that it's still going to be addressed.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to leave it where now I can't talk about it at all because I should be over it by now, but I'm not. Like, that's not going to be healthy. That's just going to build resentment.
Yeah.
But it's containing it can feel nicer for both of them, because that way once you've finished that conversation, now we're good for the next week, or you might have it a couple of times a week if it's in the early stages. But you can figure out kind of how often you might need those conversations. That might be a, personal decision.
Yeah.
But you still want to be having those conversations, but just in more of a contained way. And then you can move away from them and get on with the rest of your relationship.
I was going to ask, we did an episode recently on intimacy. Would it be useful if people haven't heard that episode to...
Yeah, look at all the ways you can create connection, because it's not just about sex. That's might be the end goal for some people, but it's about that really strong connection that they feel important, they feel valued by their partner, that leads to the awesome sex.
So listen to that one if you haven't listened to the love languages one. Probably.
Yeah, all of these things all tie in.
Yeah.
Yes. So let me tell you where it can actually help a relationship. So that's going to sound controversial because people can be like, what? How can cheating help? But to be honest, I've heard so many stories over the years where this would be a typical scenario. It would be the husband and wife with a couple of kids. They're running the kids to sports all week. They're kind of ships in the night with tag teaming things. One that's popping into my mind right now was the wife had a sport as well. So the kids had a sport, and maybe she played netball or she played basketball, whatever it was. So she's out for trainings in her own game. He, volunteers at a sporting club, for his association. So he's behind the bar helping out, a couple of times a week, also. So they're out of the house a lot for different things. And they might come, back together at night time for, an hour before bed, but it wouldn't have been very connected time. It would have just been plonked in front of the telly.
Knackered from
all the other activities.
They don't.
Yep. So even on weekends, they're fitting in friends and they're fitting in family. They're not coming together. They're just really good roommates, really good teammates with running the kids around and having everything sorted. That particular couple that I'm talking about, he had an affair, and both of them recognised through the journey that they were really just drifting apart.
Yeah.
They weren't connected at all. They weren't on each other's radars. And so what happened is, because of this crisis, all of a sudden, all the energy and attention went into the relationship.
Yeah.
So lots of it was to do with these horrible conversations they were having and all this angst. But eventually it moved into them carving out time together, them reconnecting, them realising that this relationship was really important and it had slipped. So I'm not saying that you want to get to the point where you have an affair or, there's cheating involved, but you want to look at, is my relationship actually connected? Are we stimulating each other in a way of adding in that fresh energy and growing together? Or are we just living Groundhog Day and kind of plonking on the couch at the end of the day and thinking that's our relationship?
Yeah.
And that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
So their relationship was so much stronger by the end of that. And so that's just one example, but I've heard that particular scenario, many, many, many times over, which is why when I had a friend, come to our group of friends a few years ago and her husband had cheated, and it was quite a horrible circumstance, and everyone was alarmed by the circumstance because it was so awful. But it's the therapist in me where I'm just like, so you're going to try and work it out? And everyone around me was like, what?
Why would you? That is something we should quickly cover because we should wrap up soon. But I was going to mention this earlier and then we got sidetracked, is judgment so you're the person who has been cheated on. Mm-hmm. You're going to, I imagine, have judgment from all friends and family.
Yes.
And you're going to feel pressure to break up with that person.
Yes.
Even though maybe you don't want to.
Yes.
What do you do in that situation?
You've got to listen to yourself. You've got to tune out the noise and listen to what you want to do. So this particular friend that I had, that's exactly the messaging she was getting from everybody. Everybody thought, and look, initially she was like, I'm done. That was her. And that can be people's reaction in the very beginning. Again, we're coming from that black and white thinking. We've got big hurt feelings here. We're thinking, you are dead to me, they really wanted to cut that off. But then when all those big feelings subside and they start, calming down, they might be rethinking that. They might be looking at the whole situation and having a change of heart about that.
Yeah.
And that could be really hard, because if they have told all their friends, screw her, screw him, whatever it might be, then all of a sudden they're going, well, maybe I do want to work this out. And then they've got to go to all these people and say, actually, I think we're going to figure it out. And there's going to be judgment. There really is. But they just have to stay true to what they know the relationship to be and can be.
Yeah.
And stick to that. But that can be a really hard thing for people to feel judged, or they don't want to share information with their family and friends because they think my partner is going to get judged and I want to work through this.
Yeah, yeah.
So now they feel very isolated. They feel very alone. No one's knowing really what's going on for them because they're being protective of their partner.
Yeah. So is there a time when you just really shouldn't try and save the relationship?
Yes. I think that's a personal decision, but the times when it probably would be very hard to salvage is when, if the person that's cheated is ambivalent about staying in the relationship, that can be very, very difficult, because what happens is the person that's been cheated on now can't bring up the cheating because they're worried that they're going to push them too far over the edge. So if I keep bringing this up, you're going to think, this is too hard, I am out the door. And so they're not actually processing their own feelings. They're not working through it together. And again, that's staying a bit underground, because I don't want to push you too much, because then you're going to leave the relationship, and I don't want you to leave the relationship even though you have cheated.
Yeah.
So that's not going to work, because they're not actually working through it. And in that case, if that person does bring it up to the partner and they really shut that down, again, that might build resentment later on, that you didn't work through that with me, you didn't even try and acknowledge that. So that's probably not going to work out. Even if they stay together, at some point, they might end that because it never got worked through.
And I'm going to assume that doing it for the kids is probably not the best thing either.
Yes, same thing. Because you're not actually genuinely doing it for the right reasons. You're not wanting to be with that person and wanting to reconnect and get the friendship back and get the foundation back. You're kind of going through the motions. And that would be another one, is if one person's not that invested. So again, it could be the person that's cheated, but it could be the person that's not. If they're thinking, okay, I'll give it a whirl, but their heart's not in it, they're going to go through the motions. They might come to counselling and get suggestions from, a therapist like me, and they're not going to do them.
Yeah.
Or they'll do them, but it's very much tokenistic. That's where it's not going to really work. So there's times when we can absolutely work through cheating, but then there's other times where it probably is just better to walk away. Or if you know yourself well enough to go, I'm going to ruminate over that and I'm just going to always hold that resentment for you, then they might not want to put themselves in that situation.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
Just that, it doesn't have to be a death sentence to your relationship if there has been cheating, but you do want to work through it effectively. I have lots of couples even come and see me where cheating happened early in their relationship and it never got resolved, or it could have been 3 years ago and it still is lingering. And that's because they didn't actually deal with it. They felt like those 1 or 2 conversations they had at the very beginning of when it happened, and then they say things like, okay, we need to put it in the past and we need to move forward and we need to not keep bringing this up. There's no work done on that.
Yeah.
That's just what they think is the easy way out, and it's not, because it impacts your relationship far more than if you've actually done the process, attuned to each other, done the repairs. Yeah. So you can have a strong relationship, but it depends on how much work you've put into it. And you can't work on the relationship if the affair is still going on. And even if that person is in the fringes of the background, that's going to be
like a no-brainer to me.
Well, sometimes people come to counselling and they don't tell you they're having an affair because they're secretive. Yeah. So it's only later on I'll find out, that's why that didn't work. Because when I was pointing out earlier that when we're turned into each other, when we're close and connected, when someone's still in the picture, with their partner not knowing about it, their attention is still being diverted to the side. And a long-term relationship cannot compete with an affair. They don't have the same feelings, the same excitement, the same energy around it.
Yep.
So if I'm trying to work on my relationship and it's pretty hard and I'm feeling really uncomfortable around you because we're not getting along and we're in negative sentiment override, then it's not as appealing to spend time with you. I'm going to want to still put my energy into that relationship where it's fun and it's bantery and
Yeah.
so, yes, do not even attempt marriage counselling if you still have that person in the picture. It will not work. It'll be a waste of your time, your money, your energy.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, you're extremely knowledgeable about this subject. Thank you for sharing all of that wisdom with us. I hope it helped some people, and I hope I didn't offend anyone with my little light-hearted jokes. I know it's serious and must be extremely hard. Luckily, I have not had to go through that. But,
and you know what? It can stay hard as well. I heard a really lovely example, and I'll give this as my last little one, of a therapist told me years ago that she had this elderly couple and they had been cheating early on in their relationship, and they're probably in their 70s now. And they said that every time there's a reference to cheating, on TV or the radio or wherever you might hear it, he'll just give her hand a little squeeze.
Yeah, right.
And it's just that really, no one sees that. No one knows that. But it's just that subtle, I get it.
Yeah.
And an acknowledgement. And I just think that is so beautiful and respectful and loving. So don't hide it in your relationship. Own it, name it, you know.
Yeah.
You can grow from it.
It is funny. That reminds me of when my parents got divorced, and every show, every movie I saw for the following months was about parents separating.
Yes. It's on your radar.
You will spot it.
And that's what happens. And that's why those poor people that get cheated on, that get triggered all the time, it's because it's so much, triggers around us that they're constantly having that yucky feeling and that yucky thoughts. And that's why they need that support to deal with it. They don't need a partner that's going to be abrasive and defensive. They need that loving, supportive, I get it.
Yeah.
I fucked up. And that's what we need to do to repair.
Words of wisdom, well done. Complex topic. I think you covered it really, really well.
Thanks.
Just before we wrap up, just the usual thank yous to everyone who gives us good feedback about the podcast. Always appreciate it. A couple of simple things you could do is tell your friends. So we got an email or a text message from someone.
Yes, a beautiful client said that she shared it with 6 of her friends.
Yeah.
So that was so lovely.
And that really helps. Like a recommendation from someone means a lot. So thank you if you have done that. And if you haven't, but you have some friends who might be interested, please share the episode, share the show. You can also leave reviews on iTunes, and I don't even know if iTunes exists anymore, whatever Apple Podcasts is, or leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, or hit the like button or whatever. It all just helps us have a better chance of sharing this show with more people, which means that we'll keep making the show. And if you want to follow Tracy on social media, it's at tracyquayle.therapy, Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. And our YouTube channel, I think, is also at tracyquayle.therapy. And if you want to join our mailing list, we send a fortnightly newsletter with extra tips and advice that we also get lots of nice feedback.
Yeah.
And you do a good job with that. So that is on the website tracyquayle.com. And that website, tracyquayle.com, is also where you can find details about the individual and the relationship retreats that we run.
Perfect. Good wrap up.
I'm getting better. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, honey.
All right. Bye.